Hello, and welcome to this Anatomy Physiology Bio 202 video lecture on the digestive system. I'm Mr. Kennedy, and I'll be your guide as we explore this topic. As we begin, we can see the organs of the digestive system on this graphic properly labeled. Make sure to note the name and position of each organ of the digestive system. The digestive system is also referred to as your gastrointestinal tract. The GI tract is a long tube that's opened at both ends for the transition of food during processing. The named portions of the tube include the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and rectum. Accessory structures are not part of the GI tract, but they do contribute to food processing, and they include your teeth, tongue, salivary glands, liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. There are 6 basic processes involved in digestion illustrated here. Be sure to note each. This diagram illustrates the layers of the GI tract. Be sure to note the position and name of each labeled structure. Neural innervation of the gut. Your gut is innervated using enteric nervous system, which contains a submucosal plexus and myenteric plexus, as well as the autonomic nervous system, which has parasympathetic and sympathetic divisions to either speed up the digestive system or slow it down. Your GI reflexal pathway. Your GI reflex pathways regulate GI secretion and motility in response to stimuli within the GI tract. Peritoneum. Peritoneum is the largest serous membrane in the body, illustrated in this graphic. Again, be sure to note the name and position of each labeled structure. Here is another view of the peritoneum. And a third and final view of the peritoneum. The mouth. The mouth is formed by the cheeks, hard and soft palates, and tongue. Be sure to note each labeled structure in the diagram on this slide. Salivary glands. The salivary glands lie outside the mouth and empty their contents into ducts, which deliver saliva into the oral cavity. You have 3 pairs of salivary glands, the parotid, submandibular, and sublingual. Here we see the salivary glands labeled in this diagram. The tongue. The tongue, together with associated muscle, forms the floor of the oral cavity. It's composed of skeletal muscles covered with mucous membrane. It participates in chewing, swallowing, and speech. The upper and lateral surfaces of the tongue are covered with papillae, some of which contain your taste buds. Your teeth. Your teeth project into the mouth and are adapted for mechanical digestion. This diagram shows the different layers and parts of a tooth. This diagram illustrates your dental formulas. Mechanical and chemical digestion in the mouth. Mechanical digestion in the mouth involves chewing, which mixes food with saliva and forms a bolus which can be easily swallowed. Mechanical digestion involves salivary amylase, which converts polysaccharides to disaccharides. This table will provide you with a summary of the digestive activities in the mouth by structure, activity, and result. The pharynx. The pharynx is a funnel-shaped tube that extends from the internal nares to the esophagus posteriorly and the larynx anteriorly. You might remember it being mentioned in a previous video as we discussed the respiratory system. Here, our focus shifts from air to food. The pharynx, again being funnel-shaped, is composed of skeletal muscle and lined with a mucous membrane. The esophagus. The esophagus is a collapsible muscular tube that lies posterior to the trachea and connects the pharynx to the stomach. Be sure to note the histological diagram of the layers of the esophagus on the right side of this slide. Note the names of each layer, their position and appearance. Deglutition, or swallowing, is illustrated in this diagram. Here we see the bolus reaching the stomach. This table will provide you with a summary of the digestive activities in the pharynx and esophagus by structure, activity, and result. Next, we have the stomach. The stomach is a J-shaped enlargement of the GI tract as seen here. Again, be sure to note the name and location of each labeled item in this diagram. This is an internal view of the stomach. Again, take note of each labeled structure in this diagram. The functions of the stomach can be summarized in this graphic. Be sure to note what is occurring in each of the 4 items listed. The histology of the stomach is listed here. Be sure to note the layers of the stomach and the labeled structures that are seen on this diagram. Gastric glands and cell types are illustrated in this graphic. Again, be sure to note the name and position of each item on this slide, from the surface mucosal cell all the way to the G cells. Secretion and regulation of hydrochloric acid in the stomach is illustrated here. Be sure to note how the process is accomplished in response to food arriving in the stomach. This table will provide you with a summary of the digestive activities of the stomach, again by structure, activity, and result for your review. The pancreas. The pancreas is a gland that lies posterior to the stomach. It produces enzymes that digest carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and nucleic acids. It produces sodium bicarbonate, which buffers stomach acid and empties its contents into the duodenum. Please be sure to note the labeled structures in the pancreas at the bottom of this slide. Here we see the pancreas in its proper position, tucked into the curve of the small intestine. Be sure again to note the labeled structures as illustrated in this diagram. This is the same view, but in a cadaver form. The liver and gallbladder. The liver makes bile, important in the emulsification of fats. The gallbladder stores bile until it's needed. The histology of the liver. The liver is composed of hepatocytes, bile canaliculi, and hepatic sinusoids, which are illustrated in this diagram. The hepatic acinus model of the liver is illustrated here. Blood supply of the liver is illustrated here. We'll spend more time examining the blood supply of the liver as we discuss circulation in a later video. The functions of the liver and gallbladder can be summarized here. The functions include carbohydrate, lipid, and protein metabolism, processing of drugs and hormones, bilirubin excretion, bile salt synthesis, storage, phagocytosis, and vitamin D activation. Next, we have the small intestine. The majority of digestion and absorption occur in the small intestine. The small intestine has circular folds to increase the surface area for digestion and absorption, as seen here. This is a cross-section of the histology of the small intestine. Be sure to note the position of each labeled item in this diagram. The small intestine has intestinal juice and brush border enzymes within it. Intestinal juice provides a vehicle for absorption of substances from chyme as they come in contact with the villi of the small intestine. Brush border enzymes found on the surface of the microvilli of absorptive cells break down food products as they're absorbed. This is an illustration of the wall of the duodenum, and here we can see the villi which greatly increase the absorptive surface area of the small intestine. Mechanical digestion in the small intestine is accomplished through segmentation or localized contractions of the tube, and peristalsis, which are propulsive contractions of the tube. Chemical digestion in the small intestine includes the digestion of carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. This table will provide you with a summary of the activities in the pancreas, liver, gallbladder, and small intestine by structure and activity. Absorption in the small intestine is illustrated here. Be sure to familiarize yourself with the process of absorption in the small intestine, as 90% of what we eat is absorbed here. This illustrates the movement of nutrients into the bloodstream through the villi. And this illustrates our fluid balance as maintained by our GI tract. This is an illustration of the lymphatic nodules that are found in the ileum. And next we have the anatomy of the large intestine, also known as the colon. Be sure to familiarize yourself with each labeled structure in this diagram. This table summarizes the functions of the large intestine. Again, be sure to familiarize yourself with each of the 5 aforementioned functions. This is the histology of the colon. Notice the distinct change in the mucosa. And again, note the relative position and name of each labeled item. This is an illustration of the glands and cell types of the colon. Be sure to familiarize yourself with the labeled structures as seen here. And this is a histological representation of the wall of the mucosa of the colon. Again, be able to recognize each of the labeled structures that you see on this slide. Mechanical digestion in the colon. Mechanical digestion in the colon is connected to the haustral churning. Distension reaches a certain point and the walls of the haustra contract to squeeze the contents onward. Peristalsis provides propulsive contractions and a form of mechanical digestion, and mass peristalsis occurs as strong peristaltic waves that begin in the transverse colon quickly drive the contents of the colon into the rectum. The last stage of digestion occurs through bacterial action. Substances are further broken down by bacteria that could not be broken down through any other digestive process prior. Some vitamins are synthesized by this bacterial action as well. Absorption. The colon will absorb water, electrolytes, and some vitamins. Everything that remains is referred to as feces, which consists of water, inorganic salts, sloughed off epithelial cells, bacteria, products of bacterial decomposition, and undigested portions of food. This table can provide you with a summary of the digestive activities in the large intestine, again by structure, activity, and function. Phases of digestion. The cephalic, gastric, and intestinal phases summarize the three phases of digestion. The cephalic phase stimulates gastric secretion and motility, while the gastric phase is your neural and hormonal mechanisms associated with digestion, and your intestinal phase also has neural and hormonal mechanisms associated with it. Gastric phase of digestion and the regulation of gastric juice, pH, and motility is all founded in a negative feedback system that is illustrated here. Finally, the major hormones that control digestion are summarized in this table for your review. Review the hormones by name, their stimulus and site of secretion, and their overall action. And this ends our coverage of the digestive system.